When the plane landed in Zanzibar, Ada thought she was dreaming. The salty breeze, the soft rustle of palm trees, and the golden warmth on her skin. It all felt like a reward for everything she'd endured. After the chaos of wedding planning, the snide remarks from her new mother-in-law, and the cold looks during the reception, she told herself, this is the fresh start. Just her and Jide. No more interference. But then she saw it. Standing by the resort shuttle, wearing sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat like a Nollywood diva, was Mama Jide. Ada, we made it, oh! Mama squealed, waving like she was on a family vacation. Not honeymoon vacation. Ada blinked, thinking it had to be a joke. She turned to Jide, expecting confusion, maybe panic, but instead, he smiled sheepishly. I thought you'd be surprised. Mama's never been outside Nigeria before. She's always dreamed of Zanzibar. Ada's mouth went dry. You brought your mother on our honeymoon? Jide scratched his head. She said it'd be fun. Family bonding and all. She promised to give us space. Ada stood there in silence, her heart slowly crumbling. On their first trip as husband and wife, she was third place. Again, just like she was during wedding planning, when Mama changed the caterer without asking. Just like when she chose her own asoebi color and forced Ada's parents to adjust. Just like during the wedding itself, where Mama Jide made a toast longer than the groom's. Now she was here. On their honeymoon, they got into the van. Ada stared out the window the whole ride. Mama Jide talked the entire time. About how Zanzibar reminded her of Lagos in the 70s. About how Ada shouldn't eat too much seafood because it can affect womb. Jide laughed along. Like this was all perfectly normal. That night at the resort, Ada waited. She waited for Jide to realize what he'd done. For him to pull her aside, apologize, tell his mother this was inappropriate. But instead he said, Mama's tired. She'll sleep early. Let's just enjoy. Okay? The room they'd booked was a suite for two. They added a cot for Mama. 3 nights later, Ada lay in bed wide awake while Mama Jide snored on the other side of the room. Wrapped in a hotel robe, cucumber slices on her eyes. Jide was fast asleep beside her. And Ada? She had never felt more alone. Not even when she lost her father. Not even during those long days planning a wedding no one let her own. In that dark, foreign room, Ada made a decision. She sat up slowly, walked to the desk, pulled out her phone, and opened her flight app. One-way ticket. First flight back. To Lagos. Just her. And as she clicked, confirm booking, her hands were steady, not shaking. The next morning, she'd leave without saying a word. Because sometimes, silence was louder than screaming. And Jide was about to learn that too late. The soft knock on the resort door startled Jide from sleep. He blinked groggily, expecting Ada. But the other side of the bed was empty, her pillow untouched. He rubbed his eyes and opened the door, expecting her to be standing there with a tray of breakfast or maybe a scowl. Instead, a staff member stood holding a sealed envelope. Delivery for Mr. Jide, the man said, bowing politely. Jide took it, puzzled. Inside was a short note written in Ada's neat, looping handwriting. I left before sunrise. I'm not coming back. Don't call me. This was supposed to be our beginning, Jide. But you made it a continuation of her rule. Enjoy your honeymoon, Ada. Jide's chest tightened. He turned sharply to Mama, who was tying her wrapper casually and humming a church hymn. Did you know she was leaving? Mama Jide didn't even flinch. That girl is dramatic. She probably just went for a walk. Don't worry. She'll come back when her head cools. She took her passport, Jide muttered, and her ring. For the first time, Mama looked up, her face unreadable. But Jide saw it. The flicker in her eyes. She knew. Maybe not exactly, but enough. And still, she sat there. Stirring tea like this was her own honeymoon. 3 days passed. No calls. No messages. Just silence. And it echoed louder in that luxurious suite than any fight ever could. Jide tried to enjoy the trip, snorkeling, sightseeing. But everywhere he looked, he saw Ada's absence. Her empty plate at dinner. her untouched robe hanging on the bathroom hook. The way her laugh would have filled the room during those awkward resort dances. He scrolled through their wedding photos late one night. In most of them, Ada smiled. But now that he was really looking, really paying attention, he noticed something else. In every photo, Mama Jide was there. Beside them, behind them, always present, always looming. In one shot, Ada was cutting the cake. But Mama's hand was on the knife too. He winced. The woman he married had already been pushed out long before Zanzibar. Meanwhile, back in Lagos, Ada stepped into her tiny flat and locked the door behind her. The silence of home felt so much louder than the resort room ever did. But this time, it was her own silence. Not the kind that comes from being ignored, but the kind you choose for your own peace. She dropped her bag and walked straight to the bathroom mirror. No makeup, no jewelry, no husband. She stared at her reflection, waiting for the tears to come. But they didn't. Instead, she took off the gold chain Mama Jide had given her the night before the wedding, along with the whispered warning, "Now that you're married, remember your place." She placed it on the counter and whispered to herself, "Not anymore." Back in Zanzibar, Jide sat by the pool as the sun dipped below the horizon. He checked his phone one more time. No messages. No Ada. Just Mama Jide calling out from behind him. "Come and rub my back, Jide. These resort chairs are hard on my spine." Jide didn't move. He stared at the waves, but all he could see were the cracks forming in the foundation of his marriage. And for the first time, he didn't laugh. Because somewhere deep inside, he finally realized. He didn't just lose his wife. He let her go, and she might never return. Ada didn't tell anyone. Not her mother. Not her friends. Not even her boss. She just returned to work at the insurance firm like nothing had happened. No ring, no husband, no explanations. When colleagues asked, she gave a practiced smile. "He's still on the island. I had to return early." They nodded politely, but the whispers started anyway. Still, she didn't flinch. Inside her small studio apartment, she began to rearrange everything. She moved the bed, took down the framed wedding photo, boxed up the lace from her traditional ceremony. Bit by bit, she erased the life she had nearly broken herself trying to build. She turned off her phone for a week. She didn't want apologies. She didn't want flowers. She didn't want promises that would lead right back to her sitting in the background of her own marriage. Instead, she went back to something she'd shelved for years. Photography. Long before Jide, before marriage, before trying to be the perfect bride. Ada used to capture beauty in forgotten places. Street vendors. Rain on rusted rooftops. Little girls braiding each other's hair on dusty steps. She still had her camera, gathering dust under the bed. One evening, she pulled it out, charged it, took a walk down Broad Street. She began snapping photos again, slowly at first, like someone learning how to breathe on her own. Every shutter click was healing. Back in Lagos, Jide returned from Zanzibar 2 weeks later. Alone, he stepped into their shared apartment and was greeted by emptiness. Half the closet was empty. The kitchen shelf where Ada's favorite cereal used to sit was bare. The dining table had only one chair now, hers gone. He found her wedding dress in a garment bag tucked inside the guest room closet. And beneath it, her bouquet, dried, shriveled, forgotten, just like their marriage. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the dent in the pillow where her head used to rest. Mama Jide moved in temporarily to keep him company. She unpacked her wrapper, filled the fridge with ogbono soup, and set her favorite TV channel to play all day long. She still didn't believe Ada would stay gone. "She's just acting up," she said one evening, lounging in Ada's old robe. "You know these modern girls. Small thing, they carry bag." But Jide had stopped responding. He noticed things now, like how his mother picked out Ada's bridal makeup without asking her, how she refused to let Ada sit beside him during wedding planning meetings, how, even during the church vows, she made herself the loudest voice in the room. For the first time, Jide asked himself a question he had avoided for years. When did I stop choosing my wife and start choosing my mother? That night, as Ada uploaded a photo to her new Instagram page, something caught fire. She'd posted a shot of a girl jumping rope on a flooded street, the sunlight catching her smile midair. By morning, the photo had gone viral. Photographers across Lagos were sharing it. A fashion blog reposted it with the caption, "Who is this mystery storyteller capturing Lagos through a woman's lens?" Ada didn't reply. She didn't have to. She was finally in focus. And for once, no one was cropping her out. 3 months passed. Jide still hadn't heard from Ada. Not a text. Not a call. Not a knock on the door asking for one last conversation. And that was what broke him the most. Not the leaving, but the clean break. She didn't come back to scream. She didn't beg for closure. She just disappeared, like a whisper that had learned to roar silently. He tried asking around, called her old friends, even drove past her office once, but no one gave him answers. "She's fine," was all they said, and somehow, fine felt worse than heartbroken. Meanwhile, Ada's photos kept making waves. Every image she posted told a story. Street vendors laughing over burnt plantains, children bathing in roadside gutters during rainfall, wrinkled hands sewing faded ankara. She used no hashtags, no flashy captions, just images, and each one felt like a piece of her soul. She didn't use her full name online, just AK Lens. But her work didn't stay anonymous for long. A journalist from a major media outlet reached out. Then came an art gallery curator. By the end of the 4th month, AK Lens was booked for her first solo exhibit. It would be hosted in Lekki under the title, Unseen, Stories They Tried to Silence. Ada stared at the invite when it came in. She didn't smile. Not yet, because healing wasn't about skipping to the happy part. It was about walking through every broken memory without letting it control you. But this was a step. At home, Jide was crumbling. His mother, now practically living with him, had turned his apartment into her kingdom. She moved his documents. She rearranged his living room. She asked where his salary was going and why Ada wasn't there to cook. "You should be calling her," Mama muttered, slicing ugwu loudly. "Don't let this generation of women disgrace our family. She needs to be taught humility." Jide stood at the sink, fists clenched. Something in him snapped. He turned slowly. "No, Mama. She didn't disgrace this family. We did." The knife stopped in her hand. She stared at him, shocked. But Jide didn't flinch. "I let you run my marriage before it even started. I let you speak for me, decide for me. You didn't just ruin my honeymoon. You ruined my home." Mama Jide opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. For once, the woman who always had something to say was silent. That same night, Jide sat in the dark, scrolling through Instagram again. And there it was, a promotional flyer. Bold red letters on a black and white photo. AK Lens, Lagos Gallery. Opening night. Photographer, Ada K. His breath caught. She hadn't just moved on. She had transformed. And he hadn't even seen it happening. The woman he once called too sensitive, too dramatic, too emotional, was now the face of Lagos' most anticipated photo exhibit. He zoomed in on the photo. She stood beside her work, chin slightly lifted, confidence glowing from her posture like sunlight. And for the first time, Jide realized something truly painful. She wasn't angry. She wasn't bitter. She was free. The gallery was packed. Writers, creatives, journalists, and even celebrities showed up for the opening night of Unseen. Stories they tried to silence. Camera flashes lit up the walls. Waiters passed champagne flutes. Conversations buzzed around stories frozen in Ada's photography. Gritty, soulful, unfiltered images that gave Lagos a voice through her lens. But none of that noise could touch her. Ada stood in the middle of it all, wrapped in a flowing earth-tone dress that she had sewn herself, her natural curls crowned like a halo. She wasn't just AK Lens. Tonight she was Ada Kelechi, whole, unapologetic. Scene. A young girl tugged at her dress. "Auntie Ada, are you the one who took this photo?" Ada smiled gently. "Yes, sweetheart." The girl beamed. "I want to be like you." Something inside Ada softened. Not long ago, She had been a ghost in someone else's story. Now she was a chapter others wanted to write into. In a quiet corner of the gallery, Jide stood in a borrowed blazer, shoulders tense. He had arrived late, alone and uninvited. The flyer had haunted him for weeks. Curiosity became obsession. Regret became weight. And now, here he was, surrounded by people clapping for the woman he once dismissed as too quiet. He didn't approach her immediately. Instead, he watched as people circled her like a queen, complimenting her work, asking about future exhibitions, thanking her for finally showing what Lagos really feels like. She smiled, laughed, nodded free. Jide didn't recognize that woman, because the Ada he left behind never spoke up in crowded rooms. She never walked like she belonged. She never looked this powerful. He took a deep breath and approached slowly. When Ada saw him, she didn't flinch. She didn't look surprised. She looked ready. "Hi," he said softly. "Hello, Jide," she replied. Her voice was calm, not cold, not warm, just settled. He looked around awkwardly. "This is wow. I had no idea you were this talented." She tilted her head slightly. "You didn't ask." That sentence hit harder than anything. He nodded, shame creeping over him like a slow fog. I came to say I'm sorry." "For bringing her?" "For everything," he replied. "For not protecting you. For not seeing you." Ada paused, then smiled. But it wasn't a smile of forgiveness or reconciliation. It was a smile that said, "Thank you for finally arriving. But I've already left. I wish you well, Jide." With that, she turned and walked toward a group of young photographers waiting for her. He stood there, watching her fade into a sea of people who saw her now, really saw her, and knew he no longer belonged in that frame. That night, Jide returned to the apartment and found his mother rearranging the shoe rack again. He sat down, exhausted. "Mama," he said quietly, "I want you to leave." She looked up, confused. "Why?" "Because I need to learn how to be a man without hiding behind you." Her face turned red with shock. "You're choosing that girl over me?" "No," he whispered. "I'm finally choosing myself." And it was already too late. Meanwhile, in her hotel suite, Ada sat by the window, gazing at the city skyline. Her phone buzzed. A message from an international photo magazine. "We'd love to feature your work. Would you be open to an interview?" She looked at her reflection in the window. "No more silence," she whispered. "Just focus. And light. Lots of light." 6 months later, the world had changed. Or maybe she had. Ada stood backstage at the Women in Power conference, held at a 5-star hotel in Victoria Island. She was the youngest panelist on the roster, invited not just as a rising creative voice, but as a symbol of silent resilience. Her segment was titled, "Reclaiming Voice, Creating from the Margins." She wasn't nervous. Not anymore. The Ada who used to second-guess every word, who asked for permission before speaking, who shrank herself to make others comfortable, that Ada was gone. When her name was announced, the applause was thunderous. She walked out in a bold yellow blazer and ankle-length pants, her natural hair picked out in a full afro, face bare, heart full. She didn't start with a thank you. She started with the truth. "I used to live in someone else's shadow," she said. "I thought silence meant peace, that shrinking myself was love. But silence, when forced, becomes a cage." She paused. "But now I use silence as power, not to hide but to create, to heal, to tell stories no one wanted to hear, especially my own." Cameras flashed. Heads nodded. Some in the crowd wiped away tears. Ada took her seat at the panel. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a guest. She belonged. Back in Jide's apartment, the mood was different. The TV was off. The silence was thick, but not peaceful. Mama Jide had finally moved out after their 4th argument in a week. She called Ada names, blamed her for changing her son. But Ada wasn't there to defend herself. And Jide didn't argue. He just let his mother pack, quietly. Now, alone in the space he once called home, he noticed the details. How lifeless the walls looked without Ada's paintings. How cold the kitchen felt without her laughter or Sunday pancakes. He opened the wardrobe and found a photo tucked behind a shelf. Ada smiling in Zanzibar, wind in her hair. He clutched it briefly, but he didn't call, because even he knew you don't get to call back the sun after you chose the shadows. Weeks later, he stood outside a bookstore in Lekki and saw something that made him freeze. It was a book cover in the window display. Unseen, The Story of Silence. A photography memoir by Ada Kelechi. He went inside, flipped through the pages. Photo after photo. Stories beside each one. A caption on page 47 stopped him cold. This was taken on my honeymoon. I was never lonelier, but that loneliness birthed a fire I never knew I had. He closed the book and quietly placed it back. No one in the store recognized him, and for the first time he felt what it meant to be truly invisible. Later that evening, Ada sat in her new studio in Cape Town, where she had just opened her second gallery. Her assistant knocked and said, "You got a letter from Lagos." She opened it. No name, no sender, just a short message, handwritten. "I hope you're happy now. You deserve it. Truly. J." Ada stared at the letter for a moment, then folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer, not to keep as a memory but as a reminder of how far she'd come, of who she had become, and of the woman who once booked a return ticket for one, only to find a world waiting for her arrival. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell. Thank you. We hope to see you in our next video.